What is up, everybody? It is Josh back with another video, another deck profile this time, a deck profile from home. One of my most requested things that I get asked under my videos or in my streams is, Josh, how do we play Sprite this format? And I was planning to attend the regional this weekend, and I was going to play Runick Spright, but unfortunately I can't make it there. My plans for the weekend have changed, so I decided to give you guys the list that I was going to play at that regional on the channel today. I'm just gonna share some of my thoughts on Runick Spright. Now, keep in mind, this is something I have not brought to a big tournament yet. This is something that is still in testing. I don't know if Runick Spright is a super good deck this format yet. I don't even know if it's the best Sprite version yet, but I do think it is definitely worth trying. I think it is very underrepresented right now. I think people are not giving it as much credit as it maybe deserves. And I think with a good pilot and a good list, it can definitely still do very well. So I'm gonna show you the list that I came up with today. I think it's got some neat ideas in it that I don't see a lot of people using. Before we hop into the profile though, if you like the content on the channel, feel free to support the channel by subscribing, leaving a comment or a like on the video. That really helps a ton. And without further ado, I hope you enjoy the profile, and let's get started. Okay, so for the sprites, we have 3 blue, 3 jet. Surprisingly, I don't think this is standard for Runick Spright, but I decided to bump it up again. I was playing around with 2 jets for a while, ended up going back to 3 just because I think it's good to play through hand traps because people are playing Ash and Imperm this format. I'm running 2 reds because without Elf you don't have a way to recur the red from the graveyard, and so I feel like because this deck is a very grindy deck, I really like to be able to set up a second red on the follow-up turn. Also, hard drawing this card isn't really that bad because it just helps you play through hand traps or break boards going second, so I'm happy with that. Still only 1 carrot though. I think red generally, because it plays through more hand traps and is better at breaking boards, I think is a little bit better than carrot. But there's also probably an argument to play 2 carrots. 1 Hyperia and 1 Capshell. These cards are significantly worse in Runick Spright now because of no elf. You cannot loop them, but I still think for the turn 1 it's important to have 1 of each. And only 1 of each is because we still play Lava Golem. I was playing around with versions without Lava Golem. Like I was thinking about maybe playing Kaijus and more Hyperias because Kaijus don't take up your normal summon. So if that's something you're looking for, like if you want to play more Hyperias, you can technically if you play Kaijus instead. I'm currently rocking the Lava Golem. I think it's really good against Thespia and standard Kashtira boards. The idea is that if they do go for the Arise Heart with just 3 materials and play around Nib, play around Lava Golem, I do think that that is a very beatable board for this deck. So if they commit, if they lock your back row, Lava Golem is necessary, and if they only make the Arise Heart, I think the deck can beat it even without any other board breakers. Like just the engine of the deck can do it. And that's already all the monsters. Not that many changes from last format. I think the monster lineup is still fine like that. For the Runics, we are doing the good old like standard 3 tip, 3 freezing curses, 3 flashing fire, 3 destruction, 3 slumber. I'm currently doing 2 dispelling. I still wanted 17 quick play spells as I usually prefer in my Runic decks, and I think this one is particularly good this format because it is an actual disruption against the current top decks. Like, as long as Tier Limit was in the game, this card was sometimes risky to use as a disruption, right? The secondary effect. I guess it's the primary effect. Using it and then discarding a Tier Limit felt really bad, but like the Kashtira deck searches a lot, so you can snipe one of the cards out of their hand. Even the Thespia deck searches usually before they activate Branded Fusion, so sniping a card out of their hand can also be nice. So I think this one is like an actual solid defensive card as opposed to like the Smiting Storm or the Golden Droplet. And that's why I decided to up this one to 2 for this format. And we're still on 2 Fountain. There is some merit in playing a 3rd Fountain because I actually do enjoy hard drawing this card a lot because people are playing Imperm and Ash. So if they Imperm or Ash your Hugin, having a hard drawn Fountain is very nice. This deck does have some space issues though. Then I'm playing something that isn't very standard, which is 2 Metal Foes Fusion. This card is something I tested already for YCS Utrecht back in the day, and I've mentioned it on my streams a couple of times, so for regular viewers of the Twitch stream, this shouldn't be a surprise. This card I think is pretty good in Runick Spright right now, or like in general, because of course in Runick Spright almost every hand wants to discard for Hugin, and so using this as a free discard is pretty neat because it makes Hugin less of a commitment into hand traps or into boards going second. You can just use your Hugin, discard the Metalfoes Fusion, and basically don't care if it's negated because you get the free draw off of Fusion anyways. One reason why I didn't previously use the card was because if you opened it, it was great, but if you drew into it with your fountain draws, it wasn't that good because you would no longer need a discard for a Hugin, because at that point you probably would not make another Hugin. There's a couple of cards in this deck, in this extra deck specifically, that discard even after you use Hugin. I'm going to show you that later, and that's the reason why I added this card back. I think you can play one of this. You can even play three. It depends how you like it, but I do think currently it's just a space reason why it's exactly two. There's no, like, I think if you have the room for it, which this deck I don't think has, but if you had the room, you'd even like three, because I really think you would like this card in every opening hand. But once again, since it is once per turn and this deck draws quite a lot of cards, maybe with three you would see two way too frequently. But even then, this deck plays over multiple turns, so even the second one will eventually get some value. It does replace the grind game that you lose without Elf a little bit, right? You would loop Iperia to get more draws every turn to keep the Runick engine going. And now with Fusion, you can kind of emulate that. It's not quite the same, of course, like nothing can really replace Elf, but it does help in the long run. If you get over 2 to 3 turns, if you can get 1 or 2 additional Fusion draws into more Runicks, which leads into more Fountain draws, so on and so forth, I think that's nice. And then for the Sprite stuff, we do play 3 starter, 1 smashers, and I am currently trying Double Cross. It is a trap card. I don't like drawing it going second, of course not. But it is a trap that helps you break boards without requiring the banish that Smashers requires, which is sometimes a thing, because without Elf, sometimes you don't have all that many monsters. Like, if you don't need the disruptive effect, you can still do stuff like revive the Iperia to get the draw into more Runicks. But it's just like, I think the fact that this deck lost Elf made its grind game a little bit worse. So having 2 removal targets for Jet, I think is good, because that means you can keep going for an extra turn in terms of, like, you know, your removal capabilities with just the Sprite cards. Currently, I've been liking Double Cross so far in testing. Of course, it sucks going second, but going first, it's been pretty good. And even going second, if the other 5 cards are solid, I think you can afford drawing the trap card and then help, like, it can just break the last monster that you weren't able to out on your turn without a battle phase. But that's the main deck. It's 40 cards, as usual. It's like, the one downside, I think, is that you only have room for 3 non-engine if you play it like this. Like, you could, of course, argue to, like, maybe take out a red, take out the Metalfoes Fusions for more non-engine, but honestly, I think Runick Spright is just a deck that really thrives on engine. And if you throw too many non-engine cards in it, it becomes a little bit weak. Especially game 1 when you go first half the time, and you don't really need non-engine when you go first, honestly. So I think focusing on siding more non-engine for the matchups where you need it going second is the way to go, and just hoping game 1 you either see your Lava Golem or you go first, which combined 50% to go first or the chance to go second and see a Lava Golem is honestly not that bad. And there's also a lot of matchups where you don't need to see Lava Golem to have a chance going second. Like, this deck can win with engine as well. The extra deck, 3 Hugins, 1 Gary, pretty standard, 2 Gigantics, 1 Onibimaru, very important in this version particularly without a battle phase, 1 Djinn Buster, super important, I'm going to show you why, 1 Mannequin Cat. This is a flex spot. I like it because it's happened to me a couple times where people play around Lava Golem, only summon 1 monster, and then I go Mannequin Cat, revive something, trigger Mannequin Cat, get my second monster, and then I can still Lava Golem them. That can happen. Overall, just like if you're missing the Sprites and your opponent has a Dark in the graveyard, you can make this, and so you don't have to use your Gigantic for the Sprites. You can still Gigantic for a draw with Iperia or Capshell. It's just a utility card, honestly. I think it's neat. And then 1 card that I almost make every single turn 1 now is Muckraker, and this is the one that also is the card that makes use off of the Metalfoes Fusion if you draw it later on in your turn. What this card does is you can discard a card, summon a fiend monster from your graveyard, and then you can only special summon fiends for the rest of the turn. So the way I usually do it, I'll have like a Gigantic and I'll have 1 leftover Sprite, and then I'll use the Gigantic to summon the Capshell. Then I'll use Gigantic and Capshell to make Muckraker. I'll draw for Capshell. I'll discard for Muckraker, preferably, I mean, best case scenario, discarding an excess, like an extra Runick card or a Metal Foes Fusion. And then you bring back the Cap Shell, and then you overlay these two into the Djinn Buster, which is a Fiend, because you're locked into Fiends, but you can still make Djinn Buster, and I think that's pretty neat. And then in the opponent's turn, you can detach from this, and you draw another card off of Cap Shell, because it was detached for an XYZ monster. And that is what I try to go for on turn 1, is basically Muckraker, Djinn Buster, Red Carrot, Smashers, Double Cross, as many of those as you can get, is what I like to do turn 1. But I also have, as another option, I also do play IP, which also sometimes comes in handy. And together with IP, we play Unicorn, which is also a Fiend. So even after Muckraker, you can make Unicorn. Of course, you can't use Muckraker for the material for Unicorn, but you can make Unicorn after you use Muckraker, because it's also a Fiend. And what's also a Fiend is Unchained Abomination. So sometimes Muckraker can't be used as link material the turn it is link summoned, but afterwards, like if you for example go Muckraker into IP, on the opponent's turn you can use the Muckraker as link material. So like, I mean, you would have to make the IP first if you want to use the Muckraker's effect. You can do like Muckraker IP and then use Muckraker's effect after, revive Cap Shell, and then you can either make a Unicorn here on the opponent's turn, or you can make an Abomination here. And Abomination is pretty good in this deck, I think. I'm not running Avermax because I think Avermax just isn't that good this format. Scareclaw easily outs it, Branded easily outs it, and Abomination is just like, if you can stick it onto the field, it pops a card each end phase, it triggers off of Runick Destruction, it triggers off of Runick Flashing Fire to pop more cards on the field, so it's pretty neat. And you can even summon it on your own turn after you are locked into Fiends with Muckraker, which I don't think that happens very often, but it can. And then to round out the extra deck, we have two other kind of cool options. I like Donner a lot because it is just flexible removal, which clears up your extra monster zone as well. It's also something that you can make with Gary, which is, without Elf, it's hard to have a lot of very generic links you can just make out of Gary. But sometimes you really want Gary to recycle your Fountain, so you just Gary to recycle Fountain, then Donner to like pop a card, and then keep playing with that Fountain is very nice. And then the last card is Akashic Magician, which also I'm pretty sure a lot of people don't know what that card does. It requires 2 monsters of the same type, but they can't be tokens. And when it's summoned, it bounces the cards it points to, and it points up and down. So what you can do is, it's kind of the replacement for Wind Up Kitten. It doesn't come up a whole lot, but if you have Lava Golem, you can just give them Lava Golem here, and then Akashic here to bounce it back to your hand. And I think that's a very neat option. Also, a lot of people just won't play around this and just have monsters here, and then this just turns into a free bounce, which is very neat if they don't play. It's basically the Anima thing, right? People play into Anima zones because they don't think it matters against this deck, right? Why would it? And then like this card just comes out and bounces a monster for free. And it's pretty neat in my opinion. As well as there's like other cards you can sometimes bounce just for random synergies. Like I'm citing Kurikara, for example. You'll see that in a second. Kurikara can also be bounced with Akashic. Even if they don't have 4 monsters, like I just like giving them Lava Golem, bouncing it to my hand so I have it again for next turn. I think that's neat. And that's the extra deck. That's 15. And then for the side deck, like I said before, we have 3 Kurikaras. I like Kurikara because it works against both the full zone lock thing if they trigger Shangri-Ira in your standby phase, which a lot of people do. But it also works against if they just make a Rise Heart, right? If they just make a Rise Heart, this thing comes down and beats it. I would normally also like books, like Book of Eclipse and Book of Moon, I think are strongest format. I just don't like them in this deck particularly, because if you don't have a battle phase, how am I going to deal with the set monster, right? And that's why I'm using cards like Lava Golem and Kurikara that remove the stuff from the field, so that I don't have to worry about it like on the next turn, because I can't attack over the stuff. And I think Kurikara is pretty neat for that. I'm also playing Lancea because Lancea is the card that I think prevents the zone lock the most consistent way. Like if you drop this card against Kashtira, they can't zone lock you. And that's, I think, very, very valuable. Of course, this looks odd in Runick Spright, but it's really just like, it doesn't matter that it blocks your Runicks, because if they are on the Lancea, there's really not much you need to worry about. One thing I will say is I'm currently not running Linguribo, and 6 of my cards, Lava Golem and Kurikara, lose to Ibli. And I'm currently not seeing that many people play Ibli, but if you're experiencing a lot of Ibli, or if the meta shifts towards more Ibli in the future, I think you'd have to play some other solutions other than just these, because if they have Ibli, this deck is in trouble right now. So keep that in mind. My side deck for Branded currently is Bystials. I like Bystials a lot right now. I've been talking about that on my recent streams as well. I think Bystials are kind of underrated. I don't see a whole lot of people playing them. The reason why I like Bystials is because they are really good against Branded in general, like on Branded in red, Branded Banishment, but they also help against the Branded Expulsion lock that makes the Gimmick Puppet, right? Because if they leave the Gimmick Puppet in the graveyard, you can just banish it when they target it for Expulsion. Or if they banish it to play around, for example, Ghost Bell or Bystials, you can just banish the Albion before they get the Expulsion. So I like that a lot. I think it's very consistent. The reason I'm not running Ash, which is like the most obvious thing to put into your deck against Branded, is that I feel like Ash is good against Branded. I'm not gonna deny that, but I think that everyone is on Called by the Grave, everyone is on Crossout Designator. People have even been doing fusion deployment into Aqua Dolphin to get rid of Ash Blossom. So Ash Blossom in a way is very expected, and people play a lot of counters for it. And if I draw one of these, I know it's gonna prevent the most important things against Branded, so I'm really happy with that. I don't think it's necessary for this deck to have an Ash Blossom to stop them from playing completely. I think if you throw a Bystial into the mix with an average hand, it has a very good chance at beating Branded, even if they resolve Branded Fusion, because you just interrupt the most important things, right? You either interrupt the Branded in red, or you stop the Branded Expulsion, and I think you can deal with the rest. You don't really lose to a Mirror Jade Banish or anything like that, so I think that's fine. And then for the last slots, I'm worried a little bit about like the Mirror Match and Labyrinth, so I've thrown in 3 Cosmics and Feather Duster. Not even necessarily just the Mirror Match, also other Runick variations like Runick Naturia. Cosmic is very strong, it's really good against Labyrinth, and then the Feather Duster is just like kind of the 15th card. I guess this could also be a Red Resonator if you're entering a tournament with this deck. I think that's also not the worst idea. But yeah, that's currently my approach to the side deck. I am pretty happy with it in theory, but of course, since I haven't played this in a bigger tournament yet, this mostly serves as like an idea on how Runick Spright could still be played. Yeah, and that is the deck. After a small cut, I'll show you like what I'm trying to do on the first turn. Of course, it's not always very linear, but I'm gonna try and show you a standard turn 1 combo. Just so you understand what I'm trying to achieve with the deck, let's quickly look at an average first turn hand. The deck plays very differently depending on what you draw, so this I think is representative of a random hand. So we have like 2 Runicks. I'm just gonna try and demonstrate what the Metal Foes Fusion does, and we have a Sprite card and a blank. So with a hand like this, and of course if you've ever played Runick Spright, you know that the hands can play differently depending on what you draw a lot, but it's still good, I think, to showcase. With this hand, we would like activate the Runick, summon the Hugin. Of course, we are very happy to discard the Metal Foes Fusion, and we would grab ourselves the Fountain. And now, before we do anything further, you can draw with the Metal Foes Fusion right now, but I, with this hand, would prefer summoning the Sprites first to get some Sprites out of the deck, I think. Of course, drawing a second Sprite here is not even that bad, so you could also go for the Fusion first. But I think leaving it in the graveyard until you've drawn with Fountain is probably best. So we're gonna go blue into Jet, into Starter in this case, and then Starter for, I would say, just a Sprite red, because there's a decent amount of Nibiru's in the format. So at this point, you just make your gigantic Sprite to free up your extra monster zone, and you activate the Fountain, and you can go for the Slumber to summon another Hugin. You can use this Hugin's effect if you want to discard that card to grab another Fountain. That's not a bad play. But first you're gonna activate the Fountain to draw 2 more cards, and then you're gonna activate the Gigantic to summon out the Cap Shell. And then you're gonna use the Cap Shell and the Hugin here to make a Muckraker. And then you draw a card from the Cap Shell. At this point, you can draw a card from the Metal Foes Fusion. So at this point, you have 5 cards in hand, and you can discard one of them for your Muckraker to bring back the Cap Shell, and use these 2 Darks to make a Djinn Buster. And then on the opponent's turn, the Djinn Buster will detach the Cap Shell to turn that Cap Shell into another draw. And depending on what this is, you can extend this a lot further. You know, any additional like Carrot, Smashers, or Double Cross, or if you have another Jet, you don't have to go blue for Jet, you get the Carrot. So like any additional like Sprite cards will usually make this end board a lot better, because you can add like Carrot, Smashers, Double Cross to your end board. You can also potentially turn this gigantic Sprite into an IP before you make the Djinn Buster. So the IP would be, in that case, the IP would be here. Just remember to make the IP before you revive with Muckraker, because you otherwise are locked out of Cybers. So you have to like make the Muckraker, then make the IP, then revive the Capshell with Muckraker to make the Gin Buster, but IP also solidifies this board a lot. And of course, any Runicks, like if you draw Runicks instead of Metal Foes Fusion, you draw 3 with the Fountain because you just discard a Runick instead of the Metal Foes Fusion. And if you draw a Tip, of course, any Runick hand is like infinitely better because of Tip. Also, keep in mind, we have not normal summoned. On purpose, I did not include any normal summons in this combo because we only play 2. But even with 2, you draw them occasionally, and if you draw a normal summon here, that makes this combo a lot better because you just like have another body and draw another card with that normal summon. So you end up with the same amount of cards in hand, but just more cards on the board, which is why normal summons are also really good in this deck to draw. And that's essentially it. It's like there's no real streamlined combo for it, but like that's kind of the minimum what you're trying to achieve. The minimum is like a board of these, right? And 5 cards in hand with a Fountain setup, which I think is solid. I still think that's something you can work with. I think the Muckraker is kind of a neat idea to be able to guarantee follow-up because it makes the Gin Buster and it gives you another draw off of Capshell, and you can really efficiently filter through your hand. Like you can discard Lava Golems going first to draw into more Runicks with the Capshell later. You can filter out duplicate Runicks, or you can discard Runicks that aren't as good defensively, like Dispelling sometimes, right? Or like if you have any duplicates, like I said. If you draw the Metal Foes Fusion later, you can also pitch that for the Muckrakers. I think it's a quite flexible board that is probably good enough for this format. And yeah, so I hope that makes you understand the deck a little bit better. If you enjoyed the deck profile, feel free to give the deck a try. Let me know in the comments down below how it works for you. I'm definitely going to try that deck out on stream a little bit as well in the upcoming week. So feel free to check out the Twitch link in the description below. But without further ado, have a great rest of your day. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.